Ant-Man remains the greatest what-if in the history of the MCU. Originally set to be written and directed by Edgar Wright, famous for the Cornetto trilogy, Wright was attached to Ant-Man since the beginning of Marvel's plans to self-produce their films, even participating in the studio's Comic-Con panel in 2006. As he developed the film for close to a decade, Wright finally began to gear up for production when it was abruptly announced that he would be leaving the project due to creative differences. So let's dive in and find out what went wrong and what could have been Edgar Wright's Ant-Man. In 2003, director Edgar Wright met with Artisan Entertainment and was asked if he was interested in developing any of the lesser-known Marvel properties whose rights they owned at the time. The one that immediately jumped out to Wright was Ant-Man, as he had the Marvel premiere issue from 1979 as a kid and always loved the artwork. So together with his writing partner Joe Cornish, the two wrote a treatment for an Ant-Man origin story that was inspired by Elmore Leonard's character-driven crime novels.
Pamela Greer is
Jackie Brown.
Unfortunately, Artisan wasn't a fan of the direction they took and preferred to do something more family-oriented, ending the partnership. Shortly thereafter, Marvel would regain the film rights to Ant-Man and these other titles with plans to produce these films themselves. A couple years later at Comic-Con, Kevin Feige, on the hunt for directors for these movies, asked Wright if he was interested in any of them, to which Wright told him about the Ant-Man treatment he and Cornish wrote for Artisan. After reading it, Feige would greenlight the project with the idea that Ant-Man would be part of Marvel's first slate of independently produced films, alongside Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, and Thor. And because it originally would have been part of Phase 1, the film would have been more of a standalone story, with Wright wanting to set it in the real world, similar to the first Iron Man.
I never said you were a superhero.
Didn't? Well, good, because that would be outlandish and fantastic.
Delays would eventually push Ant-Man back to Phase 2, as Wright would go off to direct Scott Pilgrim before coming back to finish the script. Unfortunately, the film would be delayed yet again so that Wright could fast-track directing The World's End, as that film's producer, Eric Fellner, was diagnosed with cancer, and Wright felt that he owed him to complete their Cornetto trilogy out of fear Fellner may not live to see it. During all of these delays, Marvel had exploded in popularity and had become a massive shared cinematic universe of films and characters, leading Feige to request that the screenplay for Ant-Man be modified in order to integrate it into the MCU, something Wright wasn't keen to do. And while he and Cornish would attempt to try and address Marvel's notes without compromising their vision, Feige, still not satisfied, decided to commission a rewrite from some of Marvel's in-house writers without Wright's input, with the rewrite allegedly becoming totally homogenized, lacking Wright's signature voice and style. Not only was Wright upset, but having written and directed all of his previous films, didn't want to be just a director for hire, feeling he would be less emotionally invested and start to wonder why he was there. And with that, Wright decided to leave the project. So how different would Edgar Wright's Ant-Man film have been? Well, since we're on the topic of the MCU, all scenes and moments referencing these things in that universe wouldn't have been present. For example, Lang wouldn't have fought Falcon, nor would he have tried to steal Stark tech from the Avengers facility in upstate New York. Furthermore, at the start of the film, we would not have seen Hank Pym working alongside Peggy Carter and Howard Stark at S.H.I.E.L.D. Instead, Wright's film would have opened with Pym as Ant-Man in action in the 60s, similar to Tales to Astonish. From there, the story would flash forward to present day and very quickly show how Scott Lang comes to acquire the suit, how he crosses paths with Hank Pym, and then teams up with them. Wright and Cornish's script was loosely based on 1979's To Steal an Ant-Man, which introduced Scott Lang.
The idea to make Ant-Man a heist movie structure was all Edgar and Joe. The idea of Hank Pym and Scott Lang as mentor and pupil, again, that was all theirs. And also the idea of a movie that all drives toward a third act where the big battle between the good guy and the bad guy takes place in a little girl's bedroom. That was always there from the beginning, and I stand by the fact that I think that's genius. I love it.
Cornish would say that only about 35% of the movie is material left over from his and Wright's version, even though their script would form the spine of the movie that was eventually made. According to Evangeline Lilly, the most defining difference between the two scripts was that Edgar's didn't take itself as seriously. His script was fun and irreverent, with Lilly describing it as a romp from beginning to end, in classic English fashion, similar to Wright's previous films in the Cornetto trilogy. Basically, it would have been an Edgar Wright film. However, Wright would note that over the course of development, while he wanted to make a Marvel movie, he realized Marvel didn't really want to make an Edgar Wright movie. Wright's screenplay also placed a stronger emphasis on Lang's criminal background, portraying him more as a hardened criminal, whereas Marvel wanted to make the film more family-friendly, and changed Scott Lang from a seasoned criminal to an ordinary individual who had served time in jail, albeit for justifiable reasons.
They were overcharging the customers, right? And it added up to millions. He blows the whistle and he gets fired. And what does he do? He hacks into the security system and transfers millions back to the people that they stole it from.
Posts all the bank records online.
And he drove dude's Bentley into his swimming pool.
However, one of the most significant changes made to Ant-Man after Edgar Wright's departure was the introduction of the Quantum Realm, which is the MCU's version of the microverse in the comics. And while his ending of the film always climaxed with a fight in Cassie's bedroom, the Quantum Realm was added as not only an explanation for Wasp's disappearance, but also to raise the stakes and give Lang one final obstacle to overcome. With how important the Quantum Realm became to the MCU, it's hard to imagine what the MCU would have been like had it never been introduced, as it was vital to the plot and Endgame. Several characters also had their roles either expanded, changed, or cut out completely after Wright left. Cut from the film was the size of Lang's crew, which was originally composed of about 15 people doing the big heist, similar to Ocean's 11, where the gang is made up of a bunch of colorful and unique individuals, each playing a small but significant role. And while fan favorite Michael Peña's Luis was part of this gang, originally his role was considerably smaller. After Wright left, however, the gang would be reduced to 3 guys, and Luis's role would be expanded. And while most people assume Peña's iconic story montages were the work of Edgar Wright, they were actually not part of his original script and were written after he left the project. Evangeline Lilly's Hope had her role expanded as well. And while the intention was always to set her up as the Wasp in a post-credit scene, she had a much smaller presence in Wright's version of the film. But once Wright left and the script went into rewrites, Lilly asked the writers to beef up her character and give her a full arc. Hank's wife, Janet Van Dyne, also didn't appear in Wright's script. The flashback sequence with her as Wasp was added after Wright left. In the original version, her character is dead and not stuck in the quantum realm. And while the villain still would have been played by Corey Stoll, in Wright's version, the character's name wouldn't have been Darren Cross, but a new MCU character named Graydon Clark, who would have used an updated form of the Ant-Man suit called the Nano Warrior instead of the yellow jacket he wore in the film. After Wright and Marvel decided to part ways, Joss Whedon, who was hard at work on Avengers Age of Ultron at the time, expressed his disappointment, saying, "I don't get it. I thought the script was not only the best script that Marvel ever had, but the most Marvel script I'd read. I had no interest in Ant-Man. Then I read the script and was like, of course, this is so good. It reminded me of the books when I read them. Irreverent and funny and could make what was small large and vice versa. I don't know where things went wrong, but I was very sad because I thought this is a no-brainer."
And it's funny, I met Stan Lee in the States, and he said to me that he always... the Ant-Man was the one character that he come up with that he never felt like they quite got it right, himself included, that when he used to write it, that he felt like they never quite nailed it, but it was always like the best idea. And I tend to agree.
And while talking about Edgar Wright's Ant-Man, everyone tends to just focus on the script. I think just as important and notably absent from the film we got was Wright's distinctive visual style that characterizes the direction of all of his films.
And attack water, please.
What? Wright is a master of visual comedy, often creating gags through framing, camera movement, and editing.
I don't believe this.
But pairing his visual storytelling with one of the most unique Marvel characters, we could have experienced one of the most visually inventive Marvel films to date, brought to life through Wright's unparalleled vision. The closest glimpse we got into what an Edgar Wright Ant-Man film would have been like was the test footage he directed. And because Marvel has become such a massive apparatus, some directors often feel like cogs in a machine, ultimately serving a larger Marvel universe rather than focusing solely on telling a unique, self-contained story with their own distinct style. And as Marvel has refined their formula over the years, has been a growing concern as of late that most of their output is veering towards a state of uniformity and also mediocrity, as there's a certain depth and vitality that can be lost when films are produced like items on an assembly line versus the power that the singular vision of a great director can bring to the table when they're given a certain amount of carte blanche to do what they want. DC, recognizing this issue with their own films, hired Matt Reeves to helm the Batman, as they wanted an auteur to craft an exceptional film that would break the mold and be able to stand on its its own rather than serve a larger universe. This is something Evangeline Lilly feared once Wright left the project, worrying that Marvel just wanted a puppet and not someone with a vision. Paul Rudd and Adam McKay, writer and director of Anchorman, Step Brothers, and plenty of other comedies and more recently award dramas, went to work on rewriting the script to fit it into the Marvel mold. But after Lilly read the revision, she would have a change of heart, saying, "I saw with my own eyes that Marvel had just pulled the script into their world. I mean, they've established a universe, and everyone has come to expect a certain aesthetic and a certain feel for Marvel films. And what Edgar was creating was much more in the Edgar Wright camp of films. It would have been so much fun to watch, but it wouldn't have fit in the Marvel universe. It would have stuck out like a sore thumb, no matter how good it was."
Here's the thing: is I get very superstitious about like sort of talking about things before they're done, because I don't want to be the boy who cried wolf.
Yeah.
And talk about something if it doesn't. I mean, it will happen.
Yeah.
But it's I feel very jinxy talking about it.
Right, okay.
It's important to reiterate that Wright didn't sign up to be part of what the MCU had become, as his Ant-Man film was originally going to be part of Phase 1 when the universe was barely interconnected, apart from a few blink and you'll miss it Easter eggs, crossover characters like Coulson, and post-credit scenes teasing a larger universe. Wright wanted to make his Ant-Man movie more like the first Iron Man, when superheroes didn't yet exist in this universe, which frankly wouldn't have worked by the time Wright was ready to make the film in Phase 2. And with Wright and Marvel refusing to budge, it was necessary that the two parties went their separate ways. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Bullets and Blockbusters for more great content.